All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final community call of 2022. We've actually done a full year of these monthly calls, and this wraps up for 2022. Very excited to see how people keep joining and hopefully getting value out of these calls. As always, my name is Jeremy Stretch. I'm the founder and lead maintainer of the NetBox open source application. And today we're going to be going through some community highlights real quick and then taking the opportunity to look back at some statistics for 2022 and looking ahead to next year. There's a lot of really interesting stuff coming up for next year. Can't go in depth about a lot of it, but there's some really cool things on the horizon. So I can't wait to get to that. And then as always, wrapping up with our community Q&A. First, a quick shout out to Daniel Anner. This gentleman reached out to me on Slack a couple days ago. He was interested in, he noticed that the device type library that we have for NetBox had kind of fallen behind a bit. A lot of stale pull requests building up, and he volunteered to go through them. So I happily gave him access to do that, and he has been a machine just knocking these out over, I think, a day or 2 days. He actually went through, triaged and merged over 20 PRs, and it's probably done even more since then, since I last looked. So just a real quick shout out to Daniel. Thank you very much for that. And by that token, anyone else who's interested in helping out with things like that, by all means, we certainly appreciate the help, and I'm happy to do whatever I can to help support that. If you'd like to check it out and help with those contributions to help us keep moving those things along, whether in the device type library or NetBox itself. If you're interested in becoming a maintainer, let me know, and we'll see what we can do. Next up, so Jordan Villarreal, my colleague at NS1, has put together some really great short highlight videos for some of the new features that came out in NetBox version 3.4. Specifically, I think he covers saved filters, the new global search engine, virtual device contexts, and some of the new functions around bulk import and updating of devices using CSV, JSON, and YAML. So check those out. Those are right here on the NS1 Labs YouTube channel. They're a few minutes each, and it's a great way to just go through and get a better idea of exactly what has been implemented if you don't have the time to go around and play with the demo. So next up, looking back at 2022, we've got a couple days left in the year, but I went ahead and put together some statistics. These are accurate as of yesterday, I think. So this year, we actually had across the NetBox repo and device type library stuff and Slack and so forth, over 6,000 active members. So that's basically someone who has a unique individual who has shown up and interacted with the community in some way. So this is a subset of NetBox users. We don't actually know how many users are out there, and unfortunately, it's impossible for us to know right now because we don't have any kind of ability to track that. But as far as people who are active in the community, there have been over 6,000 this year, and that's a 30% increase over last year. I'll show you another graph on the next slide that I think will really drive that home. We've seen 36 releases, including betas. So we've probably had maybe 4 or 5 of those are betas, but 36 total releases last year, which is, I think, is pretty typical. We'll normally do, so we do 3 milestone releases per year. So this year we had 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4 just earlier this month. And each one of those had 1 or 2 beta releases along with it. And then in between those, of course, we do the patch releases of the 3.4.1, 3.4.2, etc. Over 1,500 issues, 1,569 issues opened by 643 users. That's within the span of 12 months. So if you do the math and you map that to business days, I mean, it's a handful. And that's something that we always struggle with, and that number seems to keep going up. Not too much, but it's rising pretty consistently. With as the community grows, we'll have more and more people active on GitHub. So that's just something that we continually try to keep up with. By the same token, 439 pull requests. Now, some of those are releases. Every release takes effect as a pull request. So if you do some math, there are still about 400 pull requests that were submitted by 95 different contributors. So that does include maintainers like myself, but most of those are, of course, from other people in the community, and that is NetBox specifically. That does not count things like the device type library, which you'd expect to have far more pull requests because the work being done there, the content rather, is much more shallow. It's just YAML definitions, not actual running code. By which I of course don't mean to discredit any of the work done there. That's all very important, very valuable work. But reviewing is a lot. Those are a lot more, just a lot easier to review because you don't have to actually verify running code. We've also welcomed 3 new maintainers to the team this year. So that is, I want to say in order, it's Simon Toft, Arthur Hansen, and Jonathan Senecal. I apologize if I've got the order wrong, but I think that's the order in which they've joined. So the maintainers team continues to grow, which is of course fantastic. And Arthur specifically is a full-time employee like myself, fully dedicated to the maintenance of the project. And wrapping it up, we've got over 17,000 unique visitors to NetBox.dev. So that is our essentially our project blog site. And we're going to be doing a lot more with that site in the coming months. I'll talk about that in a minute. Finally, here's a graph of the overall member count. So this is produced by a tool called Orbit that we use and love. It's tracking essentially all of the unique individuals that interact with the NetBox community in some way, whether that be through GitHub or Slack, submitting a GitHub issue or commenting on a discussion or interacting on Slack in some way. And as you can see, we've last I checked, it was about 19,600 people. So we're about to break 20,000, active members in the community, cumulative over its 6.5-year history. So the number I shared on the previous slide, which I think was around 6,000, that's 6,000 active members just this year. In total, over the past 6.5 years, we've had close to 20,000 people being active in the community, which is phenomenal. And if you pay attention to the graph, you can see that for the first few years of the project's history, it was pretty linear. And then what happened was about 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, it started inching upward. And that trend has been continuing. And I think we'll continue well into next year as we focus more and more on growing the community and spurring greater community engagement. So I'm very excited to see where that's trending. And I think we'll see much of the same next year, if not more. So getting into next year, I've got a few high-level priorities. These are my priorities personally for the project that I'd like to see. I'm interested to hear from the other maintainers and other members in the community, if they agree with these or if they think there's other areas where we should focus. But the 4 that I think are foremost in my mind are, number one for me is encouraging just greater community engagement, hopefully through, I think primarily through streamlining the process for engaging with the community. And there's different ways to do that. So if you think about it as a funnel where you've got basically at the top of the funnel, something like a sales funnel, don't hold that against me, but it's the same concept. At the top of the funnel, you have users. So these are people who are out there in the world using NetBox. They have no idea that the community exists. They use it. Maybe they don't even administer it, right? They're just network engineers who use it on a day-to-day basis. And below that, you have people, some subset of those users are people who actually participate in the community. So they're on Slack, they're on GitHub discussions and so forth. But they don't really do anything with the project beyond that, other than maybe asking for or offering help and things like that. And then below that tier of the funnel, you have people who are actually making tangible contributions to it. So people who are opening issues and bug reports, they're submitting pull requests and so forth. And then finally, at the bottom of the funnel, you have like maintainers and core developers and so forth. And at each stage of that funnel, there are different things we can do to encourage or make it easier for people to move to the next tier, right? So how can we encourage users to engage in the community? And then for people who are already engaged in the community, how can we turn them into contributors? And that doesn't necessarily mean submitting pull requests, right? It might mean producing blog content, or it might mean working on some other ancillary project, maybe a plugin or a tutorial or something like that. So there's plenty of opportunities for that. And we just have to kind of take a step back and put ourselves in their shoes and say, okay, assuming someone wants to do this, what would be preventing them from doing it, and how do we remove those obstacles? So that's going to be a focus for next year, I think. Another priority is auditing the core code base and just kind of taking another hard, intentional look at the code base and figuring out what we can clean up and what we need to do to make sure it's going to scale long term. Again, NetBox itself has been around for, as an open source project, it's been around for about 6.5 years. The project itself, of course, is a little bit older than that. So if you consider the code base to be about 7 years old, that's about where things start piling up, right? And to be clear, I'm actually pretty proud of the state of the code base. I think it's fairly clean, but of course, everything could be cleaner. And there are certain things in there where it may just make sense to reorganize them, move some things around, and a lot of that will probably inform further development and extension of the plugins API as well, to further expose more of the core components for use by plugins and so forth. So that'll be something where it's just it does happen over time organically somewhat, but it certainly helps to be able to make a conscious effort to go through and clean something up, right? Just like in your house, like you'll clean stuff up every once in a while. The counter's dirty, let's clear that off. But then you set it like once or twice a year, maybe you set aside a day that says, all right, I'm going to go and clean everything up. It's going to be done. And same thing with code. The third one on here was expanding the plugins framework. So we'll continue to do that. We've made a ton of improvements just recently with a 3.4 release to the plugins framework. And we actually don't have a whole lot in the backlog right now. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 issues related to extending functionality for plugins, which is pretty cool. But I'm certain we'll see more of that in the coming the coming months as people get into renewed interest with plugins to see. Now that we have 3.4 out, as people start to experiment with those features, of course, that will get additional feature requests. So we'll continue not just building that out, but also working to make it more robust. And as I mentioned, exposing some more of the core internal mechanics once those have been hardened, for lack of a better word, I guess, to make them suitable for external use. We'll continue to expose those as well. And finally, renewing focus on just performance optimization and making sure the NetBox can scale. As we grow the data model over time, naturally there will be a little bit of entropy around performance as far as like, oh, this query wasn't optimized as well as it could have been. Trying to intentionally identify those. And I'd like to start a parallel initiative where we actually implement a tool like PG Hero or any number of the other tools that are out there that will actually sit and kind of sit in line with the application and analyze performance and find where are your slow queries. And that's the kind of thing we can set up on the public demo as well that I think will help us a lot, because then we'll hopefully start to get some semi-real world usage statistics from that. And if we can, easily identify like the top 20% of inefficient queries and optimize for those, I think it'll go a long way in improving performance. So again, it's just about having that intentional mindset of saying, I'm going to go about this. Like my goal today is to improve performance. It's not anything else. So I think that'll be a recurring focus for next year. So let me know what you think about those priorities. Hopefully those make sense, and I'm not overlooking anything else that people think is maybe more deserving. Also next year, so as I mentioned, we've done a full year of these community calls now, 12 of them in total. And they've all been the same format. So it's basically been me, sometimes Mark or Jordan have joined me, and basically just going through slides. And we have, as I mentioned, there's community Q&A at the end of the video from pre-submitted questions that we get ready. We put them up on slides, and we try to take Q&A live in the chat as best we can. It's often difficult because some of the questions require additional context, which is hard to convey in real time to other viewers on the call. But we're considering new formats for next year. So I would like to make this to change from sort of the webinar style format that we have right now, and maybe make it a bit more open and community based, or not community based, but rather like group based. So we're thinking about maybe just moving to a Zoom call where anyone who's interested can dial into Zoom and either listen passively or participate in the conversation. Of course, the challenge you have with that is, if I look at the chart right now, it looks like we have about 20 or so people on the call. Obviously, you hit a limit pretty quick as to how many people can actively be participating in a discussion in a venue like Zoom, or even in person, to be honest. So we'll have to figure out some kind of workflow. What I think might make sense is to have people sign up to basically like claim a 5 or 7 or 10 minute slot to talk about something that they want to talk about. And that could be sharing something that they've learned, or a problem they're dealing with, maybe crowdsourcing solutions, um, different pieces of content. We don't really know, but the overall goal here, I think, is just to encourage more community engagement, right? Give people that platform to be heard and seen, to share their ideas and their challenges, and leverage the community much in the way we as developers do. So there is a GitHub discussion for this. If you have thoughts around that, please let us know. It's discussion number 11330. Yes, we have very large discussion numbers now. But yeah, let us know what you think. I'm curious. We'll try anything once, right? Pretty much, see how it works out. But the goal, I think, is just to make it a little bit more accommodating for other people to drop in, share some thoughts, and and gain and leverage the advantage of having so many community members active on the call. Also coming next year, new NetBox.dev. So my colleague Arthur Hansen, colleague and fellow maintainer, has been working on a replacement for the NetBox.dev website, which currently exists as a static. It's a static site built with GitHub Pages and Jekyll, where basically we just throw up a blog post every now and then, tracking NetBox releases and other things that are happening. Like we'll have another blog article to post this call once the recording is available, and it's been working okay, but we never really put that much effort into it, to be honest. And there's a lot of cool stuff that we want to do with the site. So Arthur's been working on a new website that is built as a Django project, naturally, which will incorporate not just the community blog, but also a new plugins registry. So we'll finally have a tool to manage, or for people to discover new plugins. If you've ever used the website djangopackages.org, where it basically lists like thousands of all these third-party applications for Django, similar concept. We want to do something like that, where if you have a plugin and you want to share it, you can submit it to the website, and it will be listed as part of the plugins registry, so that people finally have a good way of finding these, rather than just trying to randomly search on GitHub, or us trying to keep the list on the wiki up to date, which is kind of a fool's errand. And this will actually pull down from GitHub and update stats and show star counts and things like that. So it's pretty cool. And we're looking at adding other functionality to the website over time as well. Not sure exactly what that is yet, but I'm sure we'll come up with some ideas. And that's due to launch here probably in the next month or so. We just have to get it set up and get everything running, and of course get it cut over from the live site. So look out for that. And again, if you have any ideas that you'd like to see, let us know. One of the cool aspects about this is I think it lowers the barrier for people to submit guest blog posts. So we have done a couple of them in the past, I think, but it's not very. It's a bit abrasive in that to submit a blog post, you basically have to either email me a Word file or something and I'll do it, or submit a pull request with a markdown to be merged into it, just like you would for code. It's okay. Like it works for what it is, but it'd be a lot nicer to be able to just give someone a guest login and say, here, go here, use the web interface, type, provide what you want, and have the proper workflow and so forth. So that's something else that we'll be incorporating. So if you're interested in authoring a guest blog post, by all means, let me know. And you don't have to wait for the news site either. We can do that ahead of time, right? If you want to do it next week, for example, that's perfectly fine as well. So just let us know. All right, with that, I'll go ahead and get into the community Q&A. So we have 2 questions this time around. And again, if you have any questions you'd like to throw in the chat, by all means, feel free to do so. First question is NetBox able to auto-configure all devices? So NetBox itself, most people are likely familiar with this, but NetBox itself, its role is as a source of truth, right? So it excels in managing and representing all of the information about your network, but it draws a very firm bound around its scope in terms of interacting with devices. So other tools exist for this, better tools than anything we could make. Things like Ansible, Salt, tools that are built expressly for the purpose of provisioning devices out there. So what we always recommend as best practice is, use NetBox as your source of truth and rely on these other tools to pull data from NetBox and from other sources that you may have to render and apply device configurations to those devices that are live on the network. And everyone's approach to that is going to be a little bit different because every network is a little bit different. But in general, the idea is administer the data itself in NetBox and in other sources of truth, and then use a separate tool to do that. For plenty of reasons, not just because the tool is going to be purpose built for that, but also because your network might be globally, and you may only have one NetBox instance. You don't want to be trying to configure all your devices from just your one source of truth. You want, ideally, those tools to be globally distributed so that they can operate efficiently. Okay, next question. How are community-sourced feature PRs, pull requests, handled? Would love to dedicate some time to trying out a few open items, but don't want to commit time to something, then have it not have a path to being reviewed and accepted. By Dave. So for the uninitiated, a pull request on GitHub is essentially a submission to a repository asking a maintainer of that repository to accept a proposed modification to the code that you've submitted. It's kind of strange, but basically it's just proposing a change to the code base that needs to be submitted by the owner or a maintainer of that repository. So with NetBox, we have a very specific process around pull requests. It's documented in the contributing guide. So if you go open the NetBox repo and you open contributing.md, very standard for any repo, it's all detailed in here, but I pulled out a few points that I think are worth highlighting. So for NetBox, we don't accept any pull requests that aren't tied to an issue that has already been accepted. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So the process for doing this is, first you start off with a feature request or a bug report. So if there's something you want to add to NetBox, bug reports might be a little bit different. So I'm just going to stick with feature requests right now. If you have the idea for an enhancement or new functionality in NetBox, start out by submitting a feature request, and that's going to detail what you want to do and your use case and any other considerations around database changes and third-party libraries and things like that. If you don't know exactly yet, like oftentimes people have kind of like a half-formed idea. They know kind of what they want to do, but they don't know how to go about doing it. In that case, it's best to start with a GitHub discussion first, because that's much more freeform. You can share whatever you want there, any degree of detail, and just invite other people in the community to participate in brainstorming. And then you'll get other perspectives on the problem you might want to solve. So someone might say, "Oh yeah, I'm doing it this way, or I'm doing it that way, or what about this?" And by collaborating with other people, it often helps kind of overcome some of those blockers that prevent you from forming a full idea. And then once you've got a better idea of what the implementation might look like, then it would be good to you're good to go ahead and submit a feature request. Once you have a feature request in, a maintainer such as myself or one of my fellow maintainers will review it. When we look for completion, detail, does it fit NetBox's scope, things like that. Once it's been accepted, also I should mention, so when you submit a feature request, it doesn't mean you're obligated to own it, to be clear. Many people want to, but many people just say, "Hey, this would be cool to do on the tool," and they have no interest or ability to actually work on it, which is perfectly fine. But this is within the context if you're intending to submit a pull request, by all means mention that as well, saying, "Hey, and if this is accepted, feel free to assign it to me." Once it's been accepted, then we'll assign it to you, and then you're welcome to submit a PR for it. Once the PR is submitted, that will be reviewed as any other pull request, where we look at just technical accuracy, any potential problems, compliance to PEP 8 and other standards, and et cetera. The reason for this is we want to save you time and we want to save us time. Many projects that don't deal with quite the scale of issues and number of members or users that we have a much more kind of lackadaisical approach to submitting to pull requests, which is perfectly fine. But for a project of this scale, what we found is that we don't want people to spend hours and hours of time working on an implementation for something that might ultimately not even be a fit for the project. So, think about software development from any other perspective. Like put yourself in the shoes of a software developer at a typical company. No one starts out by writing code, right? You source features from your user base or customers or from other developers. And then you discuss them, you document them, you come up with use cases and plans for implementing them. And then once everyone's agreed on the work to be done, then you start working on the code, ideally. Same thing with NetBox, right? We don't want people to burn any of their time submitting code changes that might not be accepted. We've had it in the past. Even people ignore the very clear instructions in the pull request template not to do that, and they'll submit code, and we'll say, no, this isn't actually a bug, or this isn't the right way to fix it, or something like that. And then people kind of get pissy because it's they just spent I just spent a lot of time. Like, yeah, well, that's why we say not to do that. We try to work with people as best we can. And this isn't to say that you can't start work on it. Obviously, if you have an idea for like if you have a well-formed idea and you know roughly what you want to do, and you want to convey that, rather than actually putting in a pull request, you can link to a branch comparison on GitHub. So what you can do is create a fork of the NetBox repo under your own username or organization, and then do that work, whatever work you intend to propose in a branch. And then actually, if you go to, it's basically the step before creating a pull request, where you're comparing your branch to the upstream branch, and then just save that as a link and put that in the issue and say, hey, and by the way, this is how I'm thinking about going about it. So you're one step short of actually submitting a pull request that gets a number assigned to it, but it still allows everyone to review, kind of get a rough idea for what you want to do. And what's great about that is it avoids anything with CI. So like maybe it's just like maybe you've only done a change to a model without any of the additional view or template stuff that might go with it. So you don't have to worry about doing a complete implementation. So you save yourself some time in that regard too. So hopefully that all makes sense. Again, it's all, these are some highlights, but everything's in the contributing guide. So just be sure to check that out. If you have any questions, we are in the Slack channel, of course, as always. Let's see. So while I was rambling on about pull request, there were a couple questions in the chat. Heinz asks, any plans to support Yang models in the API? Gosh, yeah. Discussion on GitHub would be a good place to start with that. That's probably a pretty meaty topic. We'll have to look into that, but possibly, this is something where, just as Jonathan suggested and Heinz agreed, yeah, start a discussion. Let's talk about it. Let's pick apart, what do you want to do with it? What should that look like? How do you want to use it? And we'll go from there. So great. I don't think there are any other questions, and we're close on time now, so I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Folks, hope everyone had a great holiday and continues to have a great holiday into the new year. We will be back next week, continuing to do what we do with NetBox. So until then, thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate you as always. And yeah, again, let us know what you think about, if you prefer this format of call or if you want to change it up. There's that GitHub discussion, check it out, or drop a note on Slack. Let us know what you think. And until next time, I will see you all, and take care. Thanks again for joining.